The afternoon sun filtered through the glass walls of Portland International Airport, casting long shadows across the arrival terminal. Violet Chen stood near the baggage claim area, holding a hastily scribbled sign that read, Sebastian Worth, in her messy handwriting. She shifted her camera bag from one shoulder to the other, still wearing the hiking boots and field jacket from her morning shoot at the wildlife sanctuary. This was not how she had planned to spend her Friday evening. 2 hours earlier, Jasmine had called in a panic. Her mother had fallen and broken her hip, and she needed to drive to Eugene immediately. The problem was that Jasmine had arranged to meet her blind date, someone her colleague had set her up with, and he was already on his flight to Portland. Violet had tried to refuse, but Jasmine's voice had cracked with worry and desperation. Please, Vi, just pick him up and explain the situation. Maybe grab coffee with him so the poor guy doesn't feel completely abandoned. I promise I'll owe you forever. So here Violet stood, surrounded by travelers and their rolling suitcases, waiting for a complete stranger who was supposed to be her best friend's potential romantic interest. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on her. Passengers began, streaming through the arrivals gate. Businessmen in suits, families with excited children, college students with overstuffed backpacks. Violet scanned the crowd, watching for someone who might be looking for a sign with their name on it. Then she saw him. A tall man in his mid-30s emerged from the gate, wearing dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow looked expensive, despite its simplicity. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled, and he carried a weathered leather messenger bag over his shoulder. What struck Violet most was the way he moved through the crowd with a kind of tired grace, as if he had traveled this path 1,000 times and found no joy in it anymore. Their eyes met across the terminal. He noticed the sign, and something in his expression shifted. Relief, perhaps, or maybe resignation. He approached with measured steps. I'm Sebastian, he said, his voice quiet but clear. Thank you for coming. Violet lowered the sign. I'm Violet. I'm actually not Jasmine. She's my best friend, and she had a family emergency. Her mother got hurt, and she had to leave town immediately. She asked me to pick you up and explain everything. Sebastian's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't seem upset. Instead, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Well, that's definitely a first. I've had dates canceled before, but never outsourced. Violet couldn't help but laugh. I'm really sorry. This whole thing is strange, I know. She felt terrible about it. Don't apologize, Sebastian said, adjusting his bag. Honestly, it takes the pressure off. No awkward first date small talk required. They walked toward the parking garage together. The late afternoon air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain that Portland always seemed to hold. Violet led him to her old Subaru, which was covered in a light layer of dust and had a bumper sticker that read, Take only pictures. Leave only footprints. Sorry about the mess, Violet said as she unlocked the doors. I spend a lot of time in the field for work. Sebastian slid into the passenger seat, glancing at the camera equipment carefully secured in the back. What kind of work do you do? Wildlife photography, Violet replied as she started the engine. I specialize in Pacific Northwest ecosystems. Right now, I'm working on a project documenting the return of wolf populations to Oregon. That sounds incredible, Sebastian said, and there was genuine interest in his voice. Do you work for a magazine or organization? Freelance, mostly. Sometimes I sell prints through galleries, sometimes I work with conservation groups on awareness campaigns. It doesn't pay much, but it feels important. Violet merged onto the highway, heading toward downtown Portland. What about you? Jasmine mentioned you work in consulting. Sebastian hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Something like that. I help companies figure out how to grow and adapt. It's mostly problem-solving and strategy. The conversation flowed easier than Violet expected. They talked about travel, about the places they'd seen and the places they wanted to see. Sebastian mentioned he'd spent time in Patagonia years ago, and Violet's eyes lit up as she described her dream of photographing the wildlife there someday. Traffic on the highway slowed to a crawl. Construction cones narrowed the lanes, and brake. Lights stretched ahead of them like a glowing red river. Violet glanced at the clock on the dashboard. "I'm sorry. This is going to take a while. Were you supposed to be somewhere?" Sebastian pulled out his phone, checked something, then put it away. "I had a dinner meeting, but I can reschedule. Actually, since we're stuck in traffic anyway, and since your friend went through the trouble of arranging this whole thing, would you want to grab dinner? No pressure, just as two people who accidentally met under weird circumstances." Violet found herself smiling. There was something refreshing about his directness. "Sure. I know a place near the waterfront. Nothing fancy, but the food is good." They ended up at a small restaurant with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. The kind of place where locals gathered and tourists rarely found. Violet ordered the salmon, Sebastian chose the pasta, and they shared a bottle of wine that the waiter recommended. As the evening deepened, their conversation moved beyond surface pleasantries. Sebastian talked about the loneliness that came. With constant travel, how airports had become more familiar than his own home. Violet shared her struggle to balance her passion for photography with the practical need to pay bills, how she sometimes questioned whether following her dreams was brave or just irresponsible. "I think people confuse success with happiness," Sebastian said, swirling the wine in his glass. "Everyone's chasing this idea of making it, reaching the top, proving something. But once you get there, you realize the view isn't what you expected." Violet studied him carefully. There was something in his eyes, a weariness that seemed too deep for someone who just did business consulting. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "Maybe I am," Sebastian said softly. "I've spent the last decade building something, and somewhere along the way I forgot why I started. Tonight's the first time in years that I've sat down with someone and just talked without an agenda, without thinking 3 steps ahead." "That sounds exhausting," Violet said. "It is." He met her gaze directly. "But this right now feels real. Thank you for that." Violet felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared understanding. "You know what's funny? I almost said no when Jasmine asked me to do this. I had plans to edit photos tonight, stay in my comfortable bubble. I'm glad I didn't." They stayed at the restaurant until the staff started stacking chairs on tables. Outside, the Portland night wrapped around them, cool and alive with the distant sounds of the city. They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to leave. "I should let you go," Sebastian said reluctantly. "But could I see you again? Not as Jasmine's proxy, just as us." Violet nodded, surprised by how much she wanted to say yes. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, and Sebastian caught a ride-share to his hotel. Violet drove home through the quiet streets, her mind replaying their conversation. She didn't know his last name, didn't know where he lived or what company he worked for. But she knew the sound of his laugh, the thoughtfulness in his pauses, the way he listened like her words actually mattered. When she finally climbed into bed that night, Violet realized she hadn't thought about her camera or her next project for hours. Instead, she kept seeing Sebastian's face across the candlelit table, kept hearing his voice saying that their time together felt real. She fell asleep wondering if she would actually hear from him again, if this strange, unexpected evening would become just a good story to tell Jasmine, or if it might become something more. 3 days had passed since that unexpected dinner, and Violet found herself thinking about Sebastian at the strangest moments. While adjusting her lens at dawn to capture a family of deer, while brewing coffee in her small kitchen, while sorting through hundreds of photos on her computer screen. He had texted her the morning after their dinner, a simple message that made her smile. "Thank you for last night. Best accidental date I've ever had." They had been messaging back and forth since then, nothing heavy, just small pieces of their days. He told her about a frustrating conference call. She sent him a photo of an owl she'd spotted. It felt easy and natural, like continuing a conversation that had never really ended. Thursday morning found Violet at her favorite coffee shop, a cozy place called Brew and Pages that doubled as a used bookstore. She ordered her usual cappuccino and settled into a worn leather armchair near the window, pulling out her laptop to work on editing. The shop was quiet except for the hiss of the espresso machine and the soft indie music playing overhead. She was adjusting the contrast on a photograph of a red fox when someone at the counter gasped loudly. "Oh my God, he's so gorgeous," a young woman said to her friend, holding up a glossy magazine. "And apparently single again after that scandal with the actress last year." Violet glanced up reflexively, catching sight of the magazine cover. Her blood went cold. The man on the cover was Sebastian, but the headline didn't say Sebastian Worth, business consultant. It read, "Sebastian Worth, the billionaire who changed tech forever, inside the mind of quantum systems' reclusive founder." Violet's hands froze on her keyboard. Her cappuccino sat forgotten as she stared at the magazine rack across the room. This had to be a mistake. Different person, same name. It had to be. She stood on shaky legs and walked to the magazine display. Her hands trembled as she picked up the copy. The face staring back at her was unmistakable. Same dark eyes, same thoughtful expression, same slight smile. But the Sebastian in this photo wore an expensive suit and stood in front of a glass building with quantum systems etched across its facade. She flipped through the article, words jumping out at her like accusations. Net worth estimated at $8 billion. Revolutionary artificial intelligence platform. Youngest self-made billionaire in the Pacific Northwest. Known for his privacy and refusal to engage with media. Violet bought the magazine with numb fingers and returned to her seat. She read the entire article twice, her emotions cycling through disbelief, anger, and a hollow sense of betrayal. He had sat across from her, talking about the emptiness of success, about wanting something real, and the entire time he had been lying about who he was. She thought about their text messages, how carefully he had avoided specifics about his work. How he had asked about her life but revealed so little about his own. She had thought he was being mysterious or private, not that he was hiding an entire identity. Violet grabbed her phone and stared at their message thread. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, a dozen angry texts forming in her mind. But what would she even say? She set the phone down, grabbed her laptop and camera bag, and left the coffee shop. She needed to move, to think, to process this revelation, somewhere other than public space. The next 2 days blurred together. Violet threw herself into her work, spending long hours in the forest with her camera, as if she could somehow photograph away the confusion in her chest. She didn't respond to Sebastian's messages. She didn't know how. Saturday evening arrived, with the opening of her photography exhibit at a small gallery in the Pearl District. It was a collection she had been working on for over a year, titled Silent Voices, The Unseen Wildlife of Oregon. Violet had been excited about this night for months, but now she moved through the gallery in a daze, accepting congratulations from fellow photographers and nature enthusiasts, while her mind remained elsewhere. The gallery was intimate, with white walls and track lighting that made her photographs glow. Images of wolves, owls, salmon, and ancient forests filled the space. Each photo had taken hours of patience, waiting in silence for the perfect moment. Her work was about bearing witness, about seeing the world that most people rushed past without noticing. Jasmine appeared at her elbow, stunning in a green dress, her arm in a sling from helping her mother. "This is incredible, Vi. You should be celebrating, not looking like someone canceled Christmas." "I'm fine," Violet lied, accepting a glass of wine from a passing server. "You're not fine. You've been weird since Thursday." "What happened?" "Before—" Violet could answer. A shift in the gallery's energy made her look toward the entrance. Sebastian stood in the doorway, wearing dark slacks and a white button-down shirt, looking completely out of place among the casual art crowd. His eyes scanned the room until they found her, their gazes locked, and Violet felt her heart stutter. Anger and longing crashed together in her chest, creating a sensation she couldn't name. He crossed the gallery slowly, navigating through clusters of people, never breaking eye contact. When he finally stood before her, Jasmine quietly excused herself, sensing the tension. "Your work is beautiful," Sebastian said quietly, gesturing to the photographs surrounding them. "These are stunning." "What are you doing here?" Violet's voice came out harder than she intended. "I needed to see you. You stopped answering my messages?" "Maybe because I discovered you're not exactly who you said you were." She kept her voice low, aware of the people around them. "Sebastian Worth, billionaire tech genius." "That's quite an omission." Pain flashed across his face. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Violet hesitated, then nodded toward a small office at the back of the gallery. They slipped away from the crowd and she closed the door behind them. The office was cramped, filled with filing cabinets and gallery paperwork, but it offered privacy. "You lied to me," Violet said, crossing her arms. "You sat there talking about authenticity and being real, and the whole time you were lying about who you are." "I didn't lie," Sebastian said, his voice strained. "I just didn't correct your assumptions. And that was wrong. I know it was wrong." "But Violet, do you have any idea what it's like to never know if someone wants to know you or just wants access to your money and connections? So you tested me? Ran some kind of experiment to see if I was worthy of the truth?" "No." He stepped closer, his expression raw. "I was selfish. For one night, I wanted to be just Sebastian. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the guy whose every move gets analyzed by investors and media. I wanted someone to see me without all the noise." Violet felt tears prick her eyes, and she hated herself for it. "You should have trusted me, enough to let me make that choice. You should have been honest." "You're right. I should have." Sebastian's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But I was afraid. I've spent 10 years watching people change the moment they learn who I am. The way they start calculating, measuring their words, seeing dollar signs instead of a person. And when I met you, when we talked for hours and you just saw me, I couldn't bear to ruin it." "But you did ruin it," Violet said, wiping her eyes angrily. "Because now I don't know what was real and what was performance. How do I trust anything? You said it was all real." Sebastian's hands clenched at his sides, as if physically restraining himself from reaching for her. Every word, every feeling. The loneliness I described, the exhaustion, the wanting something genuine, that was all true. The only thing I hid was my bank account. They stood in the small office, surrounded by the muffled sounds of the gallery opening beyond the door. Violet studied his face, searching for deception and finding only desperate honesty. "I've been photographing wildlife for 7 years," she said slowly. "You know what I've learned? Animals are most themselves when they don't know they're being watched. The second they sense a camera, they change. They put up defenses, hide their true nature. Maybe people are the same way." Sebastian nodded, understanding her meaning. "So what do we do now?" Violet took a deep breath. "I don't know. I need time to think. This is a lot to process." "I understand." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, that night at dinner was the most honest I've been with anyone in years. You saw the real me, Violet. The money just pays for the masks I have to wear everywhere else." He left the office, and Violet stood alone among the filing cabinets and paperwork. Through the door, she could hear the gallery continuing without. People admiring her work, discussing composition and lighting and the stories she had captured. She returned to the opening a few minutes later, forcing smiles and accepting compliments. but her eyes kept drifting to the entrance, half hoping and half fearing that Sebastian might return. Jasmine found her again near the end of the evening. That was him, wasn't it? My blind date who turned into your accidental romance. That was him, Violet confirmed quietly. And he's Sebastian Worth, the Sebastian Worth. Jasmine shook her head in disbelief. Vi, do you realize how insane this is? Believe me, I know. Violet finished her wine. I just don't know what to, do about it. That night, alone in her apartment, Violet looked at the messages Sebastian had sent over the past few days. Simple texts about his day, questions about her work, small jokes that had made her laugh. She read them with new eyes, searching for red flags she had missed. But all she found was genuine warmth. Her phone buzzed with a new message. Sebastian, I meant what I said tonight. Take all the time you need. But know that meeting you changed. Something in me. You reminded me what it feels like to be seen. Violet stared at the message for a long time before finally typing a response. You reminded me of something too. That sometimes the riskiest photographs are the ones worth taking. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then sat in the darkness of her apartment, wondering what kind of picture they might create together if she was brave enough to keep shooting. 2 weeks after the gallery opening, Violet and Sebastian met for breakfast at a quiet diner on the outskirts of Portland. They had agreed to start over, to rebuild trust one conversation at a time. The diner was old-fashioned, with cracked vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. It was the kind of place where nobody cared who you were or how much money you had. Sebastian arrived first, sliding into a corner booth. When Violet walked through the door in her worn jeans and flannel shirt, camera bag over her shoulder, he felt something settle in his chest. She was completely herself, unapologetic and real. I ordered you coffee, he said as she sat down. Black, right? You remembered. Violet smiled, and it felt like forgiveness. They talked for 3 hours, letting the waitress refill their cups repeatedly. They discussed everything they should have covered that first night. Sebastian told her about growing up in a small town in Washington, how he had started quantum systems in his garage with his college roommate, how success had come so fast it had swallowed his life whole. Violet shared her own story about losing her father to cancer when she was 20, how photography had become her way of holding on to moments that would otherwise slip away. I want to try this, Sebastian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I want to see where this goes, but I need you to understand what comes with it. The attention, the scrutiny, the lack of privacy. It's not easy. Violet squeezed his hand. I photograph wild animals for a living. I'm good at being patient and handling unpredictable situations. This might be harder than tracking wolves, he warned. Then I guess we'll find out together. For 3 beautiful weeks, they managed to keep their relationship private. Sebastian would drive to Portland on weekends, and they would hike in the Columbia River Gorge, cook dinner in her tiny apartment, talk until dawn about everything and nothing. Violet visited Seattle once, and Sebastian showed her his favorite bookstore and the pier where he went when he needed to think. They were careful, avoiding restaurants where photographers might lurk, staying away from his high-profile circles. It felt like living in a bubble, fragile but precious. The bubble burst on a Thursday afternoon. Violet was at a coffee shop near her apartment, editing photos, when her phone exploded with notifications, text messages, Instagram tags, email alerts, all flooding in at once. She opened Twitter and her stomach dropped. A photo of her and Sebastian hiking had gone viral. Someone had recognized him and snapped a picture from a distance. They were holding hands, laughing at something, completely unaware they were being watched. The caption read, Tech billionaire Sebastian Worth spotted with mystery woman in Portland. Who is she? Within hours, journalists had identified her. Her full name, her profession, her gallery showings, even her college graduation photo. The internet dissected every detail of her life with brutal efficiency. The comment sections were vicious. Gold digger. She's just after his money. He could do so much better. Someone found an old photo from her social media of her broken down car and wrote, "Look at this. She hit the jackpot." Another post claimed she had planned the whole thing, that she had known who he was from the beginning and manipulated Jasmine into setting them up. Violet's hands shook as she scrolled through. The cruelty. She closed her laptop and tried to breathe, but the walls of the coffee shop felt like they were closing in. Her phone rang. "Sebastian." "I just saw," he said, his voice tight with anger. "I'm so sorry, Violet. I'm driving to Portland right now." "The things they're saying," she whispered. "They think I'm some kind of scheming opportunist." "None of it's true. We know that. The people who matter know that." But the damage was already spreading. By Friday morning, photographers were camped outside her apartment building. When she tried to leave for a shoot, they swarmed her with questions and flashing cameras. "How long have you been dating? Did you know who he was? What's it like, being with a billionaire?" Violet pushed through them without answering, her heart pounding. She made it to her car, but couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. The professional fallout came quickly. A gallery in Seattle that had been planning to feature her work in an upcoming exhibit called to cancel. The curator's voice was apologetic, but firm. "We can't handle the media circus right now. It would overshadow the other artists." Another conservation group withdrew their contract for a photography project. "We need to focus on the wildlife, not tabloid drama. I'm sure you understand." Violet sat in her apartment that evening, curtains drawn against the photographers still lingering outside, and felt her carefully built career crumbling. She had spent 7 years establishing her reputation, earning respect in a competitive field, and now she was reduced to a headline, "Billionaire's New Girlfriend." Sebastian arrived after dark, slipping in through the building's back entrance. He found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by her cameras and photos, tears streaming down her face. "They're destroying everything I worked for," she said. "I'm not a photographer anymore. I'm just your girlfriend, the woman who got lucky." Sebastian knelt beside her, rage and helplessness warring in his expression. "I'll fix this. I'll make a statement. Tell them to leave you alone. That'll just make it worse. You know that." Violet wiped her eyes. "Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we need to step back until things calm down." "No." Sebastian's voice was fierce. "I'm not losing you because other people can't mind their own business." "But this is your world," Violet said. "I don't know how to navigate this. Every time I try to do my work, your shadow follows me. I'm disappearing into your life." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started typing. "What are you doing?" Violet asked. "Something I should have done years ago." He showed her the screen. It was a post for his company's official social media account, the one with millions of followers. "I built quantum systems because I believe technology should serve humanity, not replace it. I've spent a decade focused on innovation and progress, often at the expense of my own humanity. Recently, I met someone who reminded me what it means to be real, to be present, to see the world with wonder instead of calculation. Her name is Violet Chen, and she's an extraordinary wildlife photographer whose work captures the beauty most people are too busy to notice. We met by accident, and I fell for her because she saw me as a person, not a portfolio. The media attention has been cruel to her, filled with assumptions and judgments from people who don't know her. So let me be clear. Violet didn't pursue me. She didn't scheme or manipulate. She simply existed in her authentic self, and that was magnetic. If you have a problem with our relationship, you have a problem with me, not her. And to the galleries and organizations who've withdrawn opportunities from her because of me, you're punishing an exceptional artist for having the audacity to live her life. That says more about you than it does about her. I'm done hiding, and apologizing for wanting something real. If my investors or board members take issue with this, we can discuss it in the next meeting, but I won't sacrifice someone I care about to maintain a comfortable image. Violet stared at the post, then at Sebastian. You can't send that. It could hurt your company. Then it hurts my company. Sebastian hit publish before she could stop him. You're more important! Within minutes, the post had thousands of reactions. Sebastian's phone began ringing incessantly as his PR team, board members, and investors tried to reach him. He silenced it and set it aside. You didn't have to do that, Violet said softly. Yes, I did. I told you that night at dinner that I'd forgotten why I started building quantum systems. You helped me remember. I wanted to create something meaningful, something that improved lives. But somewhere along the way, I started protecting the empire instead of the purpose. If I can't stand up for someone I care about, then what's the point of any of it? Violet felt something shift inside her. She had been so focused on the ways their worlds collided, on the impossibility of their differences, that she hadn't stopped to consider what they could build together. Sebastian wasn't, asking her to disappear into his life. He was making space for her in it, even when it cost him something. I've been scared, she admitted. Scared of losing myself, of becoming just an accessory to your success. But maybe I was also scared of letting someone in completely, wealth and complications and all. So what do we do? Sebastian asked, echoing her words from the gallery that night. Violet picked up one of her cameras and turned it over in her hands. We do what I do with every difficult shot. We stay patient, adjust our focus, and wait for the right moment. This won't be easy, but nothing worth capturing ever is. Sebastian pulled her close, and they sat together on the floor of her small apartment while the world continued to spin outside. His phone kept buzzing with ignored calls. Photographers still waited in the street below. The internet still churned with opinions and judgments. But inside that moment, they had each other. They had chosen to try despite the cost. Over the following weeks, the media frenzy slowly calmed. Sebastian's statement had shifted the narrative, and several prominent voices in the art world publicly defended Violet's work. A conservation magazine offered her a feature spread, explicitly stating they wanted her because of her talent, not her relationship. The photographers eventually found other stories to chase. Violet learned to navigate the attention without letting it define her. Sebastian integrated her into his life not as a secret to hide, but as a partner he was proud to stand beside. One morning, 3 months later, they stood together in the forest, near Mount Hood. Dawn light filtered through the trees, painting everything gold. Violet had her camera ready, waiting to photograph a family of foxes that denned nearby. You know what I've learned? Sebastian said quietly, watching her work. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is just be still and pay attention. You taught me that. Violet smiled without taking her eye from the viewfinder. And you taught me that letting someone in doesn't mean losing yourself. It means finding new ways to grow. The foxes emerged from their den, and Violet began shooting. Sebastian watched her work with absolute focus and joy, completely in her element. In that moment, he understood that love wasn't about two people becoming one. It was about two people choosing to build something together while remaining beautifully, authentically themselves. Later, as they hiked back to the car, Violet took his hand. Thank you for fighting for us. Thank you for being worth fighting for, Sebastian replied. Above them, an eagle soared through the clear blue sky. Violet didn't reach for her camera. Some moments, she had learned, were meant to be lived rather than captured. And this, walking through the forest with someone who saw her completely, was exactly that kind of moment. The end.